Thyself is dedicated to the exploration of the most rewarding task an individual can ever embark on, the journey to find oneself. Our intention is to investigate the universal principles that have equipped our species to seek the treasure of all treasures, self-knowledge. With your hosts, Daniel and Eduardo, this is the Know Thyself podcast. You ready?
I'm ready, man. Are we good on, it looks like we're coming through, huh?
Yeah. Sweet, man. Well, I've been eager to talk to you about this just because it's so hard. It's so felt, you know what I mean? So I'm very, very excited. So I'll just start off by saying welcome and Happy New Year.
Happy New Year, my man.
Welcome to everyone else to the Know Thyself podcast. I am Eduardo and I'm here with Daniel.
Hello.
And yeah, man, again, every time I sit in this chair at the beginning of the year, I can't believe how far we've come, not only as friends here in these conversations, but also how much closer it feels to have these conversations with you as they resonate with the topics that we always, bring up. And sometimes we bring up these topics, I feel like they're conversations about our studies, and sometimes there's a vulnerable aspect that I want to bring because of what I might be going through or you might be going through. And I know sometimes we spend some time apart, and then when we sit here, it's like, hey, I guess I've been waiting a really long time to have this not only this discussion, but also bring up my interpretation of anything I might have been feeling in the last month. And this episode right here on the 1st of January is one of those episodes that I get very excited with. I know last year we did a great episode with the start of 2022, and here we are in 2023 and starting the mark of our third year doing this. It's just wild. We'll talk about how fast time is going by. For me, it's interesting to be 35. It's a very specific number at this age that I'm at that kind of correlates to what we're going to be talking about today with the continuation of Capricorn and its significance on continuing this idea of discipline and really putting things together for the time that's left in our physical body. And so there's just so much, man. I don't even want to go off on it. So again, Happy New Year to you, man, and to all the listeners. And so let's go ahead and continue on into this next year, but also with this extraordinary sign of Capricorn. I know there's a lot that you're going to just blow my mind with. Even just before we started recording, Daniel was just telling me these things, and debriefing with you is always so much fun because it's like, oh, I didn't even think of that. Or I'm like, I don't think I'm going to bring that up. And then you're like, oh, just wait till we talk about the glyph. And I'm like, okay, we are going to talk about that. Because sometimes do we talk about that? Do we not talk about that? And when you start to open it up without me even asking you, I'm like, we will talk about that. So much to unfold as usual. So let's get started, man. Again, I am very excited about the aspects of Saturn, and I know that we've talked about a lot, but also time, father time, and wherever you want to go first, man.
Yeah, man. It's, again, Capricorn is one of the most overlooked signs in the zodiac. I think it gets sometimes negative connotations to it because it's heavy, and it's about the human experience that's heavy, and all of the processes, and even the only thing we're guaranteed, which is that death certificate, right? Death is the only thing that's guaranteed in this form.
Correct.
And so, yeah, this is such a unique topic, and like I said, it's usually a sign that astrologers, when they first jump into astrology, they kind of don't look into this. It's not as sexy as Scorpio, and it doesn't have that hero energy like Leo. And so it's often overlooked. But usually when you kind of come back around and you start to studying esoteric astrology and the inner teachings, you realize that this is an infinite sign of mystical capacity. And it is one of the most mystical signs, actually, which is kind of funny because exoteric really talks about Capricorn as being more worried about materialistic achievement, climbing the mountain, discipline. And they're very attached to form, but the same connection that they can have with form, they can have in the spiritual realm as well. And they can operate in that. And what they really become is almost not so much, climbing the mountain, but they can actually like move mountains with their energy. And it's this really, and again, as we went through the signs, we really started to see that it really doesn't matter where your signs are, because we dance with all of these, astrological archetypes. And when you start studying Capricorn, it gets heavy and real very quickly, because you're like, this is that weight of the five sense experience.
Right.
This is the weight knowing that we're going to die. Even just thinking about that as humans, we probably with mammals and things like that, they know about, that aspect of life, but humans are the only ones that like contemplate their own death, dance with it, or completely avoid it. Like it's the elephant in the room. And we're going to kind of look at today the importance of creating a relationship with death, understanding time, the responsibility that comes with it, and our kind of limitations within it. We're going to look at time as like, the mystical understanding, which is, everything is one big moment and we're just perceiving it in these individual experiences. But we can't deny that we perceive it in a linear fashion. And Capricorn and its ruler, Saturn, is really going to let these lessons sink in. And we've all let lessons sink in of Capricorn. And we really kind of find out how much we can hold in this sign and what we're made of. And so it's this really it's the whetstone that we sharpen ourselves with. And so I think the first thing that's interesting about Capricorn is its ruler, obviously is Saturn, but it shares something like with Leo as well. Remember when we were talking about Leo, the exoteric ruler was the sun and the esoteric ruler was the sun. The sun dominated Leo, and we saw that through the conversation. It was all sun energy. Mm-hmm. Well, the same's going to happen with the boss, which is Saturn, the black sun. It's the exoteric ruler and it's the esoteric ruler. Mm-hmm. And that's so perfectly aligned with the boss, Saturn. Nobody's going to undermine them and be the esoteric ruler of their sign. They're in charge. They're the ones that are, they're the ones that are really pulling the strings. And we really learn how resistance is so vitally important in the unfoldment of the soul, and how we meet that resistance, how we overcome it, how we gain discipline, how we learn patience, humility, all of these things that can kind of come with this sign. We've got the master teacher, which is Saturn, teaching us these lessons whether we want to or not.
Right.
Saturn doesn't care. It's not like it's hates us, but it's Saturn. If you don't align yourself with natural law, learn about how you're supposed to explore yourself and uncover your essence, it's going to let you feel lost. It craves and it desires discipline for you. And we're very much going to kind of see that with that black sun making itself apparent.
I like that, man. The black sun. Yeah. The exoteric and esoteric ruler. It doesn't really necessarily leave you alone in any way. And that's what I really appreciate. I have a very interesting relationship with death. I've had a lot of people in my life physically pass on since I was a very young person, and then even friends and people still to this day. Not to say that makes me unique or special, but it's a constant reminder of the limitations that we have, and also the trickery that's created in our physical lives when we want to separate from form into spirituality. And I think that it's very hard to do that. I think a lot of people want to be more than their physical selves. They want to engage with this sort of idea of whatever makes their spiritual journey more fulfilled. But death is a constant reminder of how little time you have to make that contemplation. And I think that I personally find it very comforting in times like this, like right now. It's a very gloomy week in Arizona, which is not common, and very rainy and cold. But for people that I've even connected with, they don't appreciate that whatever is happening inside is also happening on the outside. And I do, because it kind of puts this sort of spotlight on you of what are you going to do from within? We talked about that inner fire that we created right from the transition out of that Jupiter energy into this Saturn energy, and how we're going to keep that flame inside lit, but you can augment, or you can really let this flame become bigger than this small, like smoldering of coals, if you allow it. But the only way to do this, to come to terms with some of the most harsh things that dissolution brings, even, it's just like this sort of understanding of what death is and why it's important. And I think some people just want to deny that. And I think the trickery that we face as physical beings here, and I think I like what you said about how animals, the difference between us contemplating death and like animals having a complete understanding of the cycle of their position in their physical bodies and their limitations, is that we do have this ability to kind of go, oh no, but next year, and then but next year. And there is a very green period, if you will, or golden period, where you're like, yeah, everything seems to be going my way, or everything seems to be evolving at a pace that I can handle. So you kind of feel not immortal, but you're kind of like, death isn't going to touch me yet. Death is for grandparents. Death is for someone who was bestowed some illness that wasn't bestowed onto me. But it's like, no, it's always happening every minute of every day, every second of every moment. You're dying a little bit. You're getting closer to that. And I think the exciting part about that, not to turn something tragic into something optimistic, but it's like, what are you going to do with that time then? And when you really have an understanding of that time, whatever you might be feeling inside, anxiously speaking of like, oh my gosh, am I doing enough? Am I not doing enough? Like harnessing that is that discipline. It's not so much a discipline of like, how will I make more money next year? Or what will I do to like, compartmentalize my life so it's less chaotic. It's not so much that as it is internally coming to terms with what you can't control, the ticking of the time, and finding a way to like taking that energy and making something of yourself while your physical body is here, is to me a great gift, but also a sadness that comes on you, because you're like, oh yeah, I'm only a few steps away from watching myself rise above my physical body and go, did I do enough? I was so afraid of not doing that one thing, and I should have done it. Like, why are you going to wait until that very moment and then have to maybe even come back here again? So that's something that I really appreciate about what you're saying in regards to this powerful energy coming from both exoteric and esoteric, ruler of Saturn. But yeah, it is pretty heavy, man. I like how you call it a black sun, because it really does have that. And it's hard to kind of confront, but yeah, anyways.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And this is, and this like mythological story too about Saturn and the sun, how Saturn had potential to actually be the second sun in our universe. And that's why it's got the rings, because it was actually trying to like pull energy to actually kind of create that. And it didn't. And it shows like those limitations of even what it had. And we need limitations. We need to have separation so I can tell where my form starts and it ends, and where your form starts and ends. Because if not, if there was no lines, and lines didn't cross, there would be no 5 sense reality for us to experience, for the soul to grow and unfold. And so we learn in Capricorn to kind of get this discipline, to get this discernment, because ultimately we're at this point at the 10th sign, we're spiritually aware of a lot of universal energies. And so there's this deep commitment to whatever gave us life to sustain long enough to fulfill why we were given life.
Yes.
And so that's where, Capricorn really comes in. Capricorn isn't cautious because it's afraid. It's cautious because it knows that it can't do something stupid that might alter the vehicle of its soul, right, that's going to limit its time in this experience and not fulfill its destiny. And so this is why Capricorn takes it so serious, because it knows it was sent here for a serious reason. And that's really when Capricorn can kind of like really connect to the spiritual realm and get to do that spiritual work. Like we said, it's not so much climbing the mountain. It really becomes like moving mountains for Capricorn when they can kind of do this. And so when we kind of think about how we need boundaries, how we need structures, Saturn, without the stage, there is no play. And Saturn represents the stage. It represents that like grand architect of form and everything that comes with it. And, the limitations like we spoke about. I mean, space and time itself
Yes.
is going to be under
just
Saturn.
going to say it. Time and space, man. Time and space.
And we see this, and it's this cold energy that Saturn represents. It's the coldest planet. It's the slowest move. It's a very slow moving planet as well, right? So it's very cold. And Saturn's also going to show us like how you preserve, and it teaches you how to preserve,
right?
How you preserve your life. How do you preserve food? You freeze it, right? It's this like cold energy that kind of comes with it. And our preservation and the awareness of this five sense reality, learning the rules of this jungle that we find ourselves in, where everything's bigger than us, stuff wants to eat us. If you don't learn these rules and get disciplined in those rules, your time here is going to be, your expiration date is going to come up before you were meant to, right? Because we have this free will that we can make these decisions that can either extend our timeline or it can drastically shorten our timeline. So Capricorn kind of comes in to kind of, again, give us that awareness of caution, not utilizing, like, where am I putting my energy? It's this very responsible, I don't want to keep saying the word discipline, but it's such a good representation of like what this represents. And, we'll kind of talk a lot about the structure, and even like, we'll kind of like even connect it to like the skeleton and what it rules in the body, the skeleton and the teeth. It actually like rules our form that stays after our soul leaves the body, and it actually like stays through the, that process. And so, yeah, I mean, always just holding these ideas in mind and these meditations is the best way to kind of connect and like open up the deeper reservoirs of information that these planets provide. But Saturn's everywhere. Right. This is, this is every villain in every story. This is Darth Vader, in Game of Thrones. This was the Night King. When did the Night King come? Winter. What does Capricorn represent? The winter solstice, right. The longest night of the year. It represents even like the dark night of the soul and the desire for the soul to liberate from form. And that's what we're kind of coming back in. And it's this initiation that really starts the almost what you would kind of call in alchemy, like the connection of the greater stone. And this is as we kind of move into the collective and, the responsibility and the foundations that need to be created so you can start dancing with the collective archetypes in a safe way, all kind of provided and kind of guided through the sign.
Right. I mean, it's hard to be convinced to seed the soil, but with this sign being so related to agriculture, something that I always think is an interesting metaphor or even analogy of just like what it takes to be out there in the cold and putting the seeds, while maybe many individuals go, what are you doing? Like nothing's going to grow from that right now. Everything's dead and cold. It's like, no, this isn't for the now. It's for what will feed me in the later. But you have to start with the seeding. You can't just wait until spring and then hope that in the summer it's all there for you. It's not going to work in that sort of, there's a pattern there. There's a timing that you have to actually honor. And I think that's what some people want to deny is the timing itself, because the timing is cold and it's scary and it's dark, and so you're like, no, I'm just going to wait for this to pass. And it's like, okay, yeah, you might make it through this winter, but if you didn't prepare for it, what's coming next, spring can be just as harsh if there's nothing to cultivate, or in the summer, there's nothing to eat that you didn't do for the time you were supposed to in the winter. And people are like, wait a minute, that was really a dark time. But you're telling me like now in the most beautiful, opening of the sun through this changing of seasons, and this little analogy I'm going off on, I'm also still facing darkness. It's like, yeah, you didn't do what you were supposed to do in order to like continue living through this like period of what we call life. You can't just deny it, but it's very easy to deny. It's easy to be like, I'm going to shun in. It's dark outside. It's dark inside. I don't want to participate right now. This will pass. I'll be fine. It's like, doesn't really work like that. Like there'll be more consequences than just this like physical moment right now that you're going through. If you don't like acknowledge this, if you don't really, again, back to the word discipline, which seems to be a lot of the theme of what we're talking about today. But if you don't have that initial grasp on that, it'll still come and get you.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And that's what I like about the idea of Father Time. You know, like I like how you always lean in. You're like tick-tock, and I'm like, yeah, it is pretty ominous sound if you let it be. You know, or it could just be something that's reminding you of like, hey, like, appreciate the moment you have, appreciate the people in your life, appreciate what you have been given. That's what the sound represents to me, rather than being like, no, I'm going to mute it and like stuff it in a drawer and hope for the best. It's like, that sound doesn't care. Saturn doesn't care. They're not going to be like, oh, you put me in a drawer, like I will go away. It's like, I'm still moving, you're still moving, and you're that much closer to being part of that soil, like being in the ground, you know? So
it all returns back. The rings pull it all back in,
right.
You know? And it's when we were kind of speaking, I like the connection you were making to winter and the need to prepare for the future. So yeah, we see this in the story of the three little pigs. And that's a story about these three pigs who are building their homes, right?
Right.
And two of the pigs kind of just like throw stuff up with like hay and mud, if I can remember the story correctly. And the other one lays the foundation with bricks. And they're like teasing him through the story because they're like, come hang out. We're doing cool, like, you know, gnarly pig shit over here, you know? And he's just like, no, like I'm building. I got to create this structure. And they're just like, what a square. But then the big bad wolf comes, Father Time, to blow the house down, right? Everybody's house gets blown down. Remember we talked about it with like our pod, payable on death. And so what happens when the winds of life come? What happens when Saturn, the great teacher, comes back around? Do you have the foundation to withstand the resistance and the energy that sometimes is presented to us in this five sense reality? Well, two of them don't. Their houses like, you know, completely fall down, and they actually like retreat back to the one that they were teasing. And he creates that structure and that foundation, and he's able to withstand the winds of this experience. And, you know, an analogy we always bring up is the tree, and how the tree is so deeply esoteric. And one of the reasons is it's all of its strength is in its roots and, you know, our foundations. Again, this is why Capricorn teaches us about tradition. This is why Capricorn keeps the history alive, you know, because Capricorn knows if you don't know your history, your life is a mystery, you know? So this is also going to kind of connect us to like our family lineage and, you know, those kind of aspects of our soul that gets carried around in this form. And so such a simple story with such a deep meaning. And again, we knew this as children. Like when we were learning it, we were like, yeah, those other two pigs kind of had it coming, you know, but we can see how this plays out in life. And you have to be prepared with Saturn for things that might have not come around yet. You know, you have to be prepared for anything that can happen in this five sense reality. And those are the moments that pushes us to have this commitment to the evolution of our soul, commitment to when everything falls down, am I going to lose this mystical vision? You know, am I going to lose this higher sight that I've created and fall back down into the horse and pony show? You know, or am I going to kind of stay above it and, you know, really like climb that mountain of my own spiritual, you know, atonement? And so really kind of fascinating because we're going to see a lot of stories that we were told as kids. We always talk about the sun and how the sun story is always told. Saturn's story is always told as well. You know, we see it with the three little pigs. We're going to see it represented even in the, you know, the hare and the tortoise race, slow and steady wins the race. All of these components that kind of make up this sign and its, you know, its ruling planet is always been around us. And it's very obvious to us when we see it. Like we know how important foundations are. It's everything. And so again, it's coming back to show us, you know, to really put in these lessons that it brings to the table. But again, it brings to the table so you can see how beautiful and complete you actually are. And sometimes it has to show you ugliness or what you perceive as ugliness to blossom that flower.
Right, right. I like that you talk about, you know, in a matter of words with nursery rhymes and different stories that we saw as children. They give us the lessons so quickly. And that's something that's always had a deep meaning for many individuals who when they go back and reread these stories, they go, oh my God, the lesson was already there, so plain in sight. And the three little pigs that you just brought up is so appropriate to this understanding, to how, how we prepare and what might happen and what we may not know that could happen. Because, what could have happened just as easily as, the wolf never came. And then those two pigs could have been like, hey, we prevailed because we had more fun than you did. And you just, wasted all your energy on preparing for what? And I think that's something that discourages people from ever wanting to, because that's more likely than not in some scenarios. And that's awful, because I think that's even more of a lesson that's going to be heavier for you when it does happen, when the unexpected, becomes a reality. It'll hit you even harder if you were in denial of its, power when it did come around. It doesn't have to be just, hey, the wolf will come, the wolf will, show you that you didn't prepare enough, and then you will, come knocking at my door to see if you can, have shelter with me. It may not be just like in the next coming weeks, it might be in the next coming years, but nonetheless, the more you deny, the harder it's going to be the day the lesson has come for you. You know what I mean? I think some people go through that, and you can see it. You can see how their reality falls apart. You can see how they feel betrayed somehow. They'll express how, why did this happen to them? What brought this upon themselves, or how did they bring this upon themselves? What is the world doing? Is there a God? Why is God so mean or so intense? And why is it treating me this way? It's like, no, like this lesson was bound to happen to you. It's just, you denied a lot of the preparations for this dark period that you may be going through. But we're all going through it, and it's a very, it's an individual experience that we all, have our own way of not just unfolding, but finding out throughout this linear time that we're on in this physical body. So, but where I was going with that, and I want to hear what you have to say about this. You mentioned something before we started recording about this like affiliation to God, and like our inability to even like comprehend the power of this sign. And I kind of want to talk about that. If it's in the agenda now, we can talk about it a little bit later, but this is something that kind of like came to my mind right now.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that's definitely, because I think that's the almost like the meat and potatoes of Capricorn, is when you learn about its glyph and the sigil, and what kind of carries with that. And I do love too that you brought up the idea of blaming form and reality for our problems, even blaming God for our problems.
Right.
This is where we get the scapegoat from. It comes from Capricorn, because if you don't take responsibility for yourself and your own spiritual development, you start to, with that lack of responsibility, when you start getting returns on your lack of, proper investments, and it's not coming back as anything, you start blaming the outside world. And, this is that Capricorn, Saturn, father-like energy coming around, like, you make your own bed that you sleep in, right? So like there's no room, and even in this sign, to complain. Like Capricorn, there's no time to complain. Like it's tick tock, like you're dying. What does the wolf want to do to the pigs? He wants to eat them. Who's got a taste for you and thinks you're the tastiest treat in the world? Time. And it's eating at us every day.
Yeah.
Death just whispers at us. Death is really shy, but at one point it overcomes that shyness and it fully takes us, and it succumbs us completely. And so, when we kind of think about this kind of correlation, when we're kind of like processing it, and so, we get this like external blaming, and, Capricorn energy is also kind of the sign of what you could like, there could be very mystical and spiritual, but Capricorns can also be that aspect of like atheist. Oh. And this is an argument you hear all the time when people are like, how could there be a God if there's so much suffering in the world? And as you go through the esoteric, you realize, well, the suffering is due to our own projections. It's our lack of understanding who we are. It's accepting limits and wearing them like badges. And it's these negative cycles and patterns that we've put in personally that fills into the collective, and then it manifests into the horror that we see in the shared reality.
Right.
But when we kind of think about this like universal life force energy, it gave us free will. We
True.
are in that because of our lack of discernment, spiritual growth, and even, again, understanding of like what we truly are, which is that dazzling walking star. It's our inability to see this. It's our lack of taking responsibility as a sovereign individual, consenting to tyranny. We don't realize how much we consent to, because nobody can actually force you to do anything. You have to do it. And Saturn is going to call you and like, well, what did you do? Capricorn and Saturn don't care anything about what you're going to say you're going to do.
Right.
It doesn't care. People talk all the time. Capricorn's like, show me in your actions. Like, let me actually see what you do. And that's what kind of like blossoms out of this is this, again, it's like this interesting kind of, acceptance of our own spiritual just like unfoldment.
Right.
And how important that is to actually take that responsibility, which very much is like what we kind of talked about a lot through the alchemical process. It's actually you going to the universe and you're like, no longer do you have to like burn my external reality because I'm going to, purify the internal. So what I project is in correlation to that inner balance that I've obtained. And so we see the danger, like truly spiritual danger of a scapegoat. It's God doesn't love me. It's these people are holding me back. It's these people that are in charge. It's all of these excuses we make, but at the end, our connection back to the universal life force, it comes down to us.
Right.
You have to row your own damn boat in this. And when we, approach this sign with that awareness, we start to feel our inner power and understand just how strong not only we need to be, but how actually we are to navigate this truly jungle, that we find ourselves in.
Yeah. When you were talking before we jumped into the conversation, you were talking about the glyph, and you're like, there's like these three different symbols for it. And even then, like you said, you're like, even if we were to be able to interpret it as an image, it would just probably blow our minds because we wouldn't be able to even comprehend like what it really represents. It really kind of left me thinking a lot about, what are these representations of the animal itself? And something you said about the scapegoat, it didn't really even I didn't even make that connection until just now. I'm like, you're absolutely right. The people think of it as this mountain goat, ascending, but there's so much to the idea of what this goat represents. And even the images that I've seen where the goat it's half goat and then like half sort of like a marine animal. I don't know. It's got sort of like a fishtail to it. So I want to get into that, but before we jump into the actual imagery that we've like sort of pondered about, what did you mean by like it being so? Do you think like we just don't have the ability to like take in the rays of that black sun? Like, you think like we only get just like bits of it, and because that's all we're meant to have? Or do you think like if we took it all at once, it would just like, I don't know. I don't know if I'm making any sense.
Are you talking about like the astrological glyph? Like if you're doing an astrological chart?
Yeah.
Great question, man. Because this is a curious glyph. Like,
Right.
And when I'm talking about glyphs, the glyph of like the sun is the circle with the dot in the middle.
Yes.
Aries is like the ram. So these are like the shorthand approach to like writing these signs. And Capricorn has really like the most unique one. And we've never actually seen it in its full expression because this is actually the signature of God. And what we're approaching in this 10th house is we're starting to approach esoteric information that can't be expressed in words. It's limitless. So you can't put it in a container. It's like when we say the word God, like that's the closest we can get to what that is, but that's not it because it's the infinite. We can't even articulate what the infinite is. It's beyond us. And so the reason why they say this glyph has never been seen is because even if it was seen, we probably couldn't see it. Just like how, God is like all around us and we don't
Right.
see it, right? As this universal life force, as the energy, that electromagnetic energy that powers this universe, the original source. And so this glyph is seen as this idea of the signature of God, and it's almost too powerful for us to understand. And we're going to the initiation. This is why, Capricorn is more of like a humble, silent sign, because it's just like, hey, not everything you learn is going to be through like verbal or written dialogue. It can't be. Words have limits. They're forms. They categorize and they, separate things from one from the other. Well, how do you separate the all? You can't, because it is everything.
Right.
And so that's what this glyph is going to kind of represent. And why it's called the signature of God is because God truly signs Capricorn off on you. Because where you find Capricorn, you're going to find the heaviness of your life. So whatever house you have Capricorn in, you carry weight in that house. There's going to be coldness that you feel there. If you have a lot of strong Capricorn placements, it's not saying that your life is always going to be sad, because we're going to kind of talk about how the goat can kind of like get nutrition out of anything, right? But there's definitely, it's got some like severity to it,
right,
because of its heaviness. And so why it's signed off and why the signature of God is here is because it's informing you that it knows of your struggle and you're not alone. And it's telling you that, like, I signed off on this because I know you're personally strong enough to carry this weight. Now, you might not remember that, and you might have to go through those struggles. But again, everything with Capricorn and Saturn is that the illusion that we're actually separate from others and we're separate from this universe, when we're actually all collective. And so it's like its signature to let it know that, like, I walk with you every step. Like, every tear you've had, I cry. Every smile you have, I smile. It's telling us that, like, I would not put anything on your plate that you couldn't finish. So, understanding this and connecting this allows us to be really much more empowered. And, it's so easy with this scapegoat. Oh, my life is struggles because God hates me. No, like, if you've got heaviness and resistance in your life, it's because God loves you and it wants you to show, like, just how, like, beautiful your essence actually is and how it wants you to uncover that. And that's why it brings this resistance into our life. And, when you were kind of talking about, like, the scapegoat compared to, like, the mountain goat climbing the mountain, this is really good too, because this is the sign that teaches us about hierarchy. And although we can see, like, human hierarchies as kind of like BS and things that we're, like, evolving beyond, we cannot deny the hierarchy of nature.
right.
We can't deny, what animal eats what other animal. We can't. There's a lot of hierarchies in this world, and it's like as above, so below. So if there's hierarchies in this realm, there's hierarchies in the higher realms. And when we kind of approach, like, these archetypal energies, you have an ability. If you're in a low, if you're in the low vibration and a low frequency, trying to do this bigger work in the archetypes, you can find collective demons of the collective consciousness. And as you make your way up that hierarchy and you get to more of a higher vibration and a higher frequency, this is where you're going to kind of deal with, like, your true spirit guides and, like, angels. But there's a hierarchy here. There's levels. And that's also kind of something that comes with this Capricorn understanding of, what levels am I expressing myself through, and, like, what even, attention am I giving to the deeper things that I inspire to do.
Right. Oh, I love that you say that, man. That's part of the, I think the excitement of what comes from such harsh lessons is that, the harshness gives you the marking to ascend, but the marking is painful, even when we talk about it through Dune, like what's in the box, it's pain, but the pain will reveal what you're capable of. And when you realize what you're capable of, then you're able to take in the new lessons that are coming out after the fact. You won't be able to handle the lesson if you didn't understand the physical pain that it could cause if you're not ready, you know? And if you are ready, then you realize, oh, I'm ready to take on what's next on more of an uplifting side of things. You know what I mean? It doesn't all have to be just doom and gloom through this understanding of this energy, but you need that in order to, you know, again, withstand the information that's coming next. You know what I mean? You need to have that ascension, you know, whether it's from like a perspective of your chakras all the way to the pineal gland and having this like opening of the third eye. You're not just going to have this third eye open and then see all that is always been there without you having an understanding of, you know, things that have been taken from you, and basically moving through the emotional despair that it causes when things have been taken from you, that then gives you the glimpse of why it was there or why it was taken from you in the first place. Now you can see, and that's the opening of that third eye. So you're like, oh, I see now. I can't just be like, hey, open your eye. You're going to see it. You're going to look around and be like, see what? And it's like, I guess you haven't felt yet maybe a sting that you must go through on your own in order to like have that realization for yourself. And so I think that's where there's an importance about not denying this struggle all the time, and especially during this period, is that this is what should make you want to create that brick house in order to avoid that wolf that is going to eat you eventually. You can't always run from it. There'll be other wolves that'll come knocking at that door. But for the time being, like the pain and suffering you may have put into and the lack of fun you might have had within the story of the three little pigs at least won you another day, and another day that you are able to be here will give you another glimpse as to what's beyond the above while you're living in the below. And so, yeah. No, I love the signature of God, man. That's awesome, dude.
Yeah, absolutely. And like, you know, the signature of God, it's, you know, it's signed off on the resistance that you're going to face, not as a punishment, but as an opportunity.
Yes.
Right.
Oh,
it's an
awesome,
opportunity. Man. Yeah. To see who we really are.
Totally. I love the way you just said that. Not as a punishment, but as an opportunity. And
yeah. And we know this, like, you know, you grow in your times of struggling.
Totally.
It's again, we know we've always spoke about it before of like what fame can do to like a musician.
Right.
And sometimes like that money and that comfort like snaps the creativity, you know, because they needed to like, you know, when we're struggling, that's when we really kind of produce, because we have to, when we can't find it in the external world through physical experiences, which we all go through. At one point, the only nutrition we can find is like internal, and we kind of have to go within. And, you know, when you were kind of talking about like how sometimes pain allows us to open up that eye, you know, we really start to learn what this mountain is. The mountain that the goat climbs is the spine. You're climbing the chakras, you're climbing the Kundalini, and you're getting to the highest aspect of that spine to be able to see through that third eye and create spiritual discernment, which is this higher perspective that we take, where we are really, you know, taking in the five experience and know the five experience, but also connected to the collective. And we're working in both of those worlds. And the Capricorn is that initiation gate to start that process, and how important it is, you know, because Capricorn is going to teach us to be cautious, but too much fear is just as dangerous as not enough fear. Right. You know, like there are true dangers, right? But if you're too afraid and you're too anxious about the future, you'll freeze like a deer in the headlights. True. Right? And so it's like there's this like middle balance there as well, and that's where we kind of find like discernment. It's actually like having like a connection to your intuition, that you're using your intelligence in line with your intuition to help guide yourself in a responsible, here it is again, disciplined way. Right. That Capricorn kind of teaches us. And, you know, again, it teaches us through our failures. It's your struggles. It's when you get knocked down and have to get back up is when you really know your strength. And it allows for us to, you know, through these struggles, if we start looking at the cycles and patterns, we could see, you know, when I build a castle out of sand, it dissolves, it falls down. And so we kind of learn of like, okay, what is, what is an essence that I can touch into that is going to be eternal, and it's going to almost, overcome time, and what can actually like rise me above that time. And that's when we learn these like deeper aspects that we're getting into, which is like unconditional universal love, service to the evolution of consciousness, all of these bigger ideas of what the human experience can start to explore once it's kind of collected the personality and like overcome the personal demons, like our own personal story, overcoming our personal traumas. Well, once you fulfill the personal completion of yourself, then you elevate and you take an initiate, like you get initiated to actually help the collective in its shadow process.
Right.
And so again, we see a hierarchy. Like this is sepraternal. There is no end. It's just going to keep going. You just kind of keep climbing that 7-step ladder. And this is also why Saturn is like the 7th planet, right? Kind of showing us even the boundaries of like growth and, even decay, because Saturn kind of rules a lot of those. And like the processes of, again, like limitations, even when you break ages down, like you said, I'm 35.
Yeah.
Well, that's you're in their 5th year, your 5th cycle of Saturn that's starting.
Yeah.
So there's like these unique new lessons that are going to come up.
Right.
New resistance. All of these things are going to kind of be a part of that cycle. Well, this is again why we see it in 7, and that 7 note, 8th note is the next octave, which kind of like alludes to, again, just how much this sign and this planet have influence on this consciousness expression that we are all kind of dancing with.
Yeah, absolutely, man. I mean, you said something a little bit earlier about how this is a feminine sign, or the representation of this female energy. And I want to open the floor to that for you to kind of, give me a little more on that. Just because, with such a harshness that we've brought into with father time and being that masculine idea, but this is a feminine sign. Like, let's sort of go back to that if you don't mind.
Yeah, no, perfect. And it's kind of funny that even as we were kind of having this conversation, again, the importance of understanding how these energies like personally connect with you. Capricorn is the most unique sign for me. So where my Capricorn placement is, I also have Neptune, Uranus, Saturn, and the moon. And they're all kind of like cut together, and they're all like kind of on top of each other. Astrologers usually look at that as like, oh shit, that sucks. Like, not as anything sucks in astrology, but there's like a lot of heaviness, and there's a lot of like almost like flightiness and illusion that comes in this. And it's kind of funny as we're having this conversation, like we usually don't stop, but I'm like, it's hard for me to like almost like contain this understanding. And so thank you for bringing that back that way, because it was super important.
Yeah.
Which was like, why is it a feminine sign? And what we're kind of looking at there is we learn to truly what we surrender to in this sign. And remember, we were speaking about like masculine components of consciousness and feminine. And we talked about surrendering as one of the most difficult things to do. Well, it is surrendering to natural law, to the limits of our, physical experience. All of these things take an immense amount of introspection and, foundation to be able to actually like bend our knees to that universal life force and actually serve, not only humanity, but again, like the collective consciousness. And so this feminine sign comes around to show that this is all work that has to be done on the inner. This is an inside job kind of thing that Capricorn does, of, again, climbing that mountain of our Kundalini and the spinal cord, getting to that one eye view to be able to have that spiritual discernment. And so this feminine energy that kind of carries is to show us, again, the strength in surrendering and the strength in serving others, because Capricorn is all about serving others. Capricorn's usually, if you have a strong Capricorn placement, you have no problem serving others. It's very difficult to know how to serve yourself, and you almost usually avoid yourself, because as we're kind of going to more of these externalized signs, and it's like the us in here kind of energy, we we lose like personal sense and identity with ourselves.
Right.
And so Capricorns often can kind of be, they almost like sacrifice themselves for their community. Well, the only thing that's supposed to be sacrificed here is that scapegoat mentality. This is why religions sometimes do like a sacrifice of a goat. It's to represent the sacrifice of that materialistic scapegoat that blames form on everything, that blames God, or it's this person's fault, it's that fault, and that's something that kind of pulls. And so with this true sacrifice of like the lower goat for like the true goat, we really kind of start to like understand its process in the role.
Totally. And I really do. When you talk about the goat, you were making me think about the greatest of all time. And I like how you say the sacrifice of the lower self for the higher self, and understanding that the true meaning of what makes someone so great is having that like sacrifice for the community, for the team, for the greater purpose. And I think, when you talk about that, it's very telling about the goat. I like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And the discipline that takes it. Like,
right.
It's usually like a sports term that they're talking about there, I think, when they say like the GOAT. But yeah, the immense amount of, foundation that has to be put into the area to become the greatest of it.
Yeah.
And the willpower to wake up at 5 a.m. Capricorn is the energy that puts you to take a cold shower over a hot shower.
Yes.
Capricorn wakes you up and gets you out of bed even though you didn't sleep well that night. And where Sagittarius is like, nah, let's just kind of like go have a fun day. Capricorn is all about like, what can I do with the time that was given? Because Capricorn, it listens as well. It knows what you say every morning. You say good morning.
Right.
Because you're mourning your death in this realm. And you're getting closer to death with every morning. And that's why they say good morning, because of this container that we're in and the finiteness of it. So again, time is the greatest honor that it was given to us to experience, but it's also the greatest responsibility. And this like mentality of the goat really teaches us a lot in that.
Right.
Even when we just think about the characteristics of a goat. We speak about it as the mountain goat, the idea of it ascending the mountain and able to find its footing on, very narrow terrain. Mm-hmm. Well, the path is very narrow. It's only going to get more narrow as we kind of go, and it takes more intensity. Its spiritual process doesn't get easier. We've seen this personally with the growth and the exploration that we've had and the intensity of it in this last year. How much more intense has our life got? When you live with intention, life gets more intense. Capricorn, concentrates this energy. How you spend what you can do in one day with Capricorn energy can be a whole lifetime for somebody on spiritual development. Like, it uses the moment, the minutes, and the seconds, and it's dialed in. It's like focused in on what can I accomplish. And it's almost like Capricorn energy when you have a lot of Capricorn energy. And again, I say this like joking, but it's almost like when you were coming and the angels are like setting you up to like take form. If we do have ultimate like repetitive lives until we like, break out of that circle in the samsara, it's almost like you told the universal life force, like, I'll go back there, but this is the last time. Like, give me all of the lessons and like really concentrated experience. So, I can really kind of like become that goal and activate out of this. We spoke about that when we talked again about alchemy, of how they would take like camel dung and they would bury it in the earth. And then they would like dig it up after a couple of years and they would notice it would turn into these like cool little crystal things. And they found the deeper you buried it, the quicker they became, crystals. Well, the deeper you go into your own hell, the quicker you get out of it. The persistence, the perseverance through hell and like going through your own hell. Well, we spoke about that with the hot coals. Like, how do you walk across hot coals? You have to put all of your pressure in your feet. You can't like half step it. You're going to burn your feet.
Right.
And so you actually have to like embrace the experience of going down to hell. And there's a lot of things that Capricorn provides that's that's really important for the rest of this experience. Like, we talked about freezing as a way to preserve.
Yes.
Well, what's the easiest way to handle water and explore it? The only way you can actually hold it in your hands if it's frozen. And so even that frozen component of the emotions, well, you can explore it. And there's actually like something that kind of comes from that, because it's not so fluid, and it doesn't just like take the form. It actually like solidifies it. And so this like frozen nature can also, not only do we have to like thaw a lot of parts of ourselves, but we can actually like explore how an emotional blockage actually was created by kind of looking at like the glacier of where we froze over.
Right.
And hell isn't hot. Hell's cold.
Right.
Like hell form is cold, And so even in Dante's Inferno, when he kind of finds like the base of hell, it's frozen over. It's a frozen tundra,
Right.
kind of representing, again, the desire to, find the above. You have to journey all the way to the below.
Totally. Absolutely. Yeah, I think I like what you said, that this last year for both of us has been I don't like to even say tumultuous, because at this point it's like, what does that even mean, man? Like how far are we gonna break down these beautiful understandings of like the complicated yet simple ways to learn lessons and gain a better perspective on the harshness that life can bring you. At some point you got to make peace with it. And one thing I think in regards to this sign, it wants to express this sort of karmic, or this idea of like, not you reap what you sow, but you talked about this very much in the beginning. We were talking about the idea of the alligator in regards to its the glyph also, or the actual like what represents Capricorn. And we didn't really even open up the alligator so much. And so I was always curious. I'm like, is it that what we're experiencing with it, which is like finding true patience and learning how to be patient, learning how to navigate through this like period of like, when will I be able to come back up to the surface? I'm not really quite sure how to put that into the perspective of that image, but I wanted to know how it would kind of like form that idea of the alligator,
of the like the alligator crocodile. And when that's great, because we're going to kind of explore the other animal correspondences that come with this sign, and that being an earth sign, a form, there's going to be a lot of correspondences that we can talk about of this archetype finding physical expression.
right?
And so, yeah, we talked about the goat. We talked about it being, disciplined, having perseverance to climb that mountain. And, also something that's really unique with the goat is it's actually like durability of its stomach. Goats can eat so many things and actually like derive nutrition from it.
Right.
They'll eat anything. And people that have goats know this. This correspondence and this idea is exactly what Capricorn teaches you as well. Are you able to get nutrition from things that you don't think are going to be as nutritious as an experience? And we were kind of talking about it earlier. Like it's super easy to kind of feel spiritual growth in a yoga retreat, maybe in a hot springs in like Northern California or someplace like unique and cool. Really easy to like spiritually grow and feel like connected to source. A little bit more difficult being in like traffic on a Tuesday afternoon, being late to an appointment. Can you find spiritual nutrition in that moment?
Right.
Can you actually like process that and take it through it and go through the alchemical process, which is pretty much digestion of extracting the spiritual growth and lesson that came from this? Now, we talked about that with like how important failures are to our unfoldment. Well, yeah, what are you getting out of your failure? Again, are you blaming it on a scapegoat? Are you blaming it on other people? Or are you accepting responsibility that you had something to do with this because you are a creator? And so much things kind of come with goats, and like their ability to be able to literally like eat anything and get nutrition.
Right.
Like even the survivalist community know this, because like a goat, if all breaks down and it's like Mad Max out there, a goat can actually drink contaminated water and be able to process it and take nutrition. And then you can actually drink the milk of that goat and sustain off of it. If there's no clean water, you can drink goat's milk because they can actually filter it through, that it will be purified when it comes out the other way. Showing a lot about purity. What did Hercules have to do on this journey before he started? He had to purify himself. And so, a lot of that energy there. And even goats with their connection of goats are all about the square. There's like only one animal that has like square eyes. And the goat does. There's no animal that's got like, if you look into the eyes of a goat, it's an experience.
Totally.
And it's representing that cube that you were talking about. What's in the box? Pain. And the goat is like this representation of it. But even their like funny nature, like goats are silly. Like they can be mean, they can be aggressive, but like they're really entertaining to spend time with. Like they're silly, they climb things, and they're just like funny. And it's kind of funny because like most comedians actually have a lot of Capricorn energy, because Capricorn also represents like, sarcasm and like making light of a situation, or expressing your interpersonal struggles in like a humorous way to like lighten other people's load. Be like, oh, you're insecure about that. Like, this is something that I've done before. And it like lightens it for the other person, service to humanity. And so we learn unique connections with the goat. Right. So the alligator crocodile, that's another representation. And again, kind of ties this into the sea goat that we're going to look at in a minute. But the crocodile represents the importance of patience. Now, like crocodiles can like get to a really quick top speed, but they don't hunt things down like a cheetah does by chasing it down. They wait, and they use discernment, and they use patience, allowing time to go through its motions, everything in its time. This process of patience is also something that comes with Capricorn, because Capricorn preserves. It's the preserver, right? So it preserves our energy. Capricorn is who teaches us not to push our energy in outlets that are not doing anything for our development. It's actually what pulls us back and teaches us the importance of actually like waiting. And like, why don't you like evaluate the situation or wait for things that kind of come to you? You don't always have to be chasing things. Capricorn teaches us that other side of that coin of what kind of comes with that. And again, that the crocodile hunts in a way that it like almost camouflages its stuff as like a log or something, right? Yeah. As it kind of was presented. But yeah, it teaches us the importance of patience, honoring the cycles of time, and knowing that again, there's limits that we're working with in that, and we have to surrender to it in this reality.
Totally. Yeah. Go ahead. No, I was just going to say, I like that when you brought up last year for both of us, that was something that I feel like we both honored very much, not just for the creation of this podcast and the conversations we have, but just like even our friendship. Like there are a couple times that you came up to me and you're like, hey, I can't, we shouldn't do an episode today, or hey, can we do it next week? And I was like, absolutely. And you're like, cool, I appreciate it. And I'm like, no worries, we'll talk later. Then when you would come back around, you were like fire. And it's just like the way you were speaking. And I'm like, and as you were speaking, you're like, I think this is why we weren't meant to have the conversation whenever we wanted to, or had scheduled to meet in person. And I think it's hard because you think, oh God, we have a responsibility to not just the people who listen, but the way we want to unfold these teachings. But you can't unfold a teaching if you're not really honoring and being patient with this idea you're talking about with the crocodile. Within these conversations, you need to have this sort of distance for a minute before you can open and speak again about so much that you want to unfold, but also you want to have your own perspective on, you want your own like influence on your own experience. And I think that us giving each other that respect is sort of honoring what we talk about here on the episode of the podcast. And so every time you would thank me, I'm like, no, you don't even have to thank me anymore, because I think this is what we need to do. We need to honor this patience and understand that, it is very much the American dream you were talking about, for us to like, if we work hard, this is what happens in the reward system that we've created, and this idea of like, you work hard, you reap the benefits later on. But there are times where you have to just like give yourself the space to just like not say anything, not go so hard, and sit with your thoughts and sit with them again. And then the second, third time, maybe even the fourth, that you finally feel like you can come out and express yourself is meant to be exactly the way it was supposed to be from the time you sat with your thoughts. And it's hard to do. I think sometimes we don't want to do that. We've been raised to believe that if you're not doing something, then what are you doing? And where is your worth if you're not in action? But I think being, able to not be in a state of action is one of the greatest, disciplines, back to the word, that you have to sort of master. There's action with inaction. You know what I mean? Like, there is such a thing as sitting quietly. It's a form of action that you have to sort of make space for in order to then make the next move. And I think that's very hard for some people in the Western world to do, that I should say. So
it's really too the idea that, how many times do we make ourselves look busy and like do busy work in our life and do things to really avoid bigger things that we should be looking at? Or we're actually like running around problems like, oh, let me just not, rather than like deal with like these depressive thoughts and these suicidal thoughts, let me just like run and like just like clean my room. I'm just going to clean everything. And like that could be a great therapy to like reset everything. But maybe we should look into those feelings that we were having. We like, again, like the difference between like this and Virgo, sometimes like Virgo is so like analytical and linear, it feels like it has to be doing something, and it can like tire itself out because it's doing so much. Where Capricorn is just like, where do you want to put your energy? Okay, put it in those outlets. This isn't where you need to be putting this energy. So like, again, have some structure in your life that you can actually like cut that off, and some inner authority of like, you rule this hierarchy, which is you. We speak about it with hierarchies, like who's at the top of your pyramid, who's looking through your eyes, is it your culture? Is it, are you just like feeding out something of somebody else's thoughts, or is it actually you? Because again, we're taking responsibility for our spiritual development in this sign. That's who runs the show. That's a big part of it. And so, were you gonna say something?
No, that was it, man. I just wanted to connect that idea of the alligator, of the crocodile, of that reptile that sits and waits patiently for its next meal, or for its way of camouflaging itself for long periods of time, but then makes the move right when it was supposed to make the move. And I'm not saying that that's what we have to be. I'm not like associating us to like the snake in the grass. I'm just saying there is nothing wrong with having strategy that makes you very inactive. And I think sometimes we're very hard on ourselves for being inactive, thinking, no, this is the time I'm supposed to move. And it's like, no, conjuring up a plan is itself a discipline. Going out and doing too many things on a physical, like you just said, like busy work can distract you from like making that plan. Sometimes I do believe that going on a long walk is very beneficial to being like, okay, this is where all my thoughts that are scattered come to one conclusion, and that was good. But sometimes it's like, you don't have to go and do a million different things in order to feel fulfilled. Sometimes you might have to just sit and let for fulfillment to like sort of, again, build itself up within you so it can come out and make the next move in order to like avoid wasting the time that is actually coming after us.
Yeah, and I think I like what you're saying here, because I think you're talking to something that probably a lot of Capricorns need to develop. Capricorns can struggle with sitting with themselves because they still feel that duty, and they're like, I'm not pulling it all around, but like Capricorn, like sitting with itself and actually being like, what do I need? What do I want? Who am I? Who am I not? Well, we have to stop and actually do that. So I love that you're expressing this today, of like the inner evaluation and, serving the self. Like we again, it's so much easier for a lot of us to serve others, and we have no idea how to serve ourselves.
Yeah.
I even see it with like natal chart readings. Gosh, I could look at your natal chart and we could talk all about like your childhood and all these things. It's so much more difficult to pull it's the natal charts now are like 4 hours because I just become like so excited, right? And I'm so amped up and I'm just like yelling at stuff, and 4 hours isn't even enough. It's like we're always like going 5 minutes over, right? It would be very hard for me to look at my chart and do it for 4 hours because there's like this again. It's harder for me to serve myself in that realm where I can serve others through it, and I'm so blessed that I am able to do that. But it's this like unique kind of resistance that happens, and this is actually where the final animal comes in, which is the unicorn, which is the representation of Capricorn, and the unicorn really represents the piercing, using its horn to pierce the heart of the lion, which represents that ego that won't allow us to stop. That ego that gets us tied to the wrong hierarchies, get us competing with because Capricorn,
Go for it.
We kind of think about like the social ladder and even the comparing ourselves to others.
Yes.
Because this is the sign that we kind of meet the us in here. Because remember, the first 6 signs are like the me in here.
Right.
And then the next 3 are like the me out there, like one-on-one relationships, cycles and patterns, and like seeing ourselves connected with people, like community education. Well, in the 10th sign, we meet the group and we meet others, not just one person, but we meet others. And so from this, we start to look. And this is the idea of like looking at the other grass is greener on the other side, and so there's this like hierarchy that kind of comes where we kind of like start pushing ourselves like, well, where do I position up against this person? And we get into, I talked about it earlier as kind of the horse and pony show. Well, when you get stuck on that hamster wheel of life and you only have materialistic aspirations, you are in the horse and pony show. That's why your neighbors are called neighbors, right? It's a representation of like the horse. Horse from like, even when you think about marriage and you think about all the terms, we use a lot of horse terms, which means that it kind of shows the inability of when you don't see what's truly like the spiritual desire of the soul, you're going to get caught up in working out other people's energy. You're going to be consenting to not like the unfoldment of you. And so this like connection to like false hierarchies and positioning ourselves as like how we like, stand up or go like compared to another. Well, this is something that we kind of have to also surrender. And that idea of, they might have that. And I could ask like, why me? Or I could just like be like, no, I should be spiritually concerned with my own journey. Stop interfering, stop like glamorizing or trying to put myself over others. It's not me being better than others. It's me being better than I was yesterday.
Right.
Again, that inner truth that Capricorn really kind of pushes. And this unicorn, when it pierces the heart of the lion, allows for that lower ego to be sacrificed for the higher ego.
Yes.
Again, Capricorn is one of the portals, one of the gateways. We have a gateway in Capricorn and we have a gateway in Cancer. Now, Cancer was the crab. A crab lives on the land and it lives in the sea. So it lives in both worlds. Well, this sign traditionally was the sea goat. It's the goat that was on land and the goat in the sea. And so it shows the blending of these two elements of earth and water coming together. This is the one that plays in both realms. And this is really if it was from spirit to matter with Cancer, and it's like our incarnation and our birth. And then in Capricorn, it's graduating out of matter to make ourselves back up to spirit. Right. And really kind of like fulfilling that unicorn energy, which is, again, where does the unicorn's horn come out of? It comes out of its like equivalent third eye. It's that higher understanding. It's that spiritual lens that we've accumulated through these previous 9 labors that we're exploring.
From the readings of Alice Bailey in the labors of Hercules, that resonates with the ascensions and the understandings of these ascensions. And I'm going to quote this. This is quote, "The final ascension is that which marks the emancipation of the initiate of very high degree who becomes consciously a world savior. But it is the second initiation, the rising up of the lower psychic nature, on which we have to work so that every desire, mood, and every emotion is lifted up into heaven. End quote. And I love that because it's everything everything was our conversation has been, encompassing, but what you just said in the last few 10, maybe 5-10 minutes, that's exactly what I think kind of concludes this idea of even the representation of the animals that, or the glyphs, or the idea of what they are and what they're living in, and what they're actually providing us information from their symbol, but also like the understanding of what this ascension truly means with the mountain goat rising. And so, beautifully said, man. I think everything you were talking about today was more than I could have wanted to open up the floor or have a conversation with you on the floor, because I wanted to, like, again, I'm already finding the inspiration out of this journey through Capricorn. And I hope that those who are listening also feel that same way, because again, Saturn energy, this dark sun, this black sun, can make you think otherwise and sort of like pull you into the incorrect direction. Because again, you said this before, you have to climb to the below in order to get to the above. And I think that seems so contradicting for a lot of people. I think it seems like, no, that doesn't make sense. Like, why am I going deeper? Why is it getting colder? And it's like, well, for you to have a true understanding of warmth before the fire burns you, you got to know the degrees and levels of like where they come from. And you have to know the opposite, which is the coldness that it comes with. And in order to like rise slowly into a place of, true, not just fulfillment, but also like purpose. And I think that it's difficult, obviously, in this idea of this sign. But I think everything we talked about gives me ultimately optimism.
Yeah, no, absolutely, man. And it's one of the sign that just kind of comes back around to be like, there's no shortcuts.
Right.
There's no shortcuts to this.
Right.
You're going to go step by step. You're going to, you have to explore all aspects of your shadow. You have to unlock all those doors. And we spoke about it last time as like, you knock on all these doors, you open up these closets of, trauma, or, it could even be something that's even beyond you in this spot. Because like, again, when you're dealing with the collective, some of these things that you're going to be working with aren't personally aligned to you. It's part of like consciousness in general. And we kind of go on this way of like knocking on doors until we like knock and we realize that we are the one that knocks, and we actually hear the knock. And it's like this connection to this inner self. And there really is, there's no shortcut. The gate gets narrow. The process can feel very lonely. And, when we think about this idea of Capricorn, it's always so like determined, but we also look at it, when we kind of approach this like 10th sign, we also look at like the 10th house, and the 10th house talks about like your career and like what you bring to your community. And your career is like, whether we like it or not, it's 1/3 of your life. You spend a lot of time doing work, and there's something very like spiritually fulfilling about work when you can align your work with your spiritual destiny. And that's more important for some. Some people work so they can explore spirituality on the side. Some people tie it together. Again, looking at your 10th house will probably give you a lot of understanding of what your inner need is in that realm. What we do with our time, what you spend your time on, is what this 10th house happens. And what Capricorn learns as it spiritually climbs that mountain is there's other accounts that energy gets deposited in. It's not just that physical account that comes on your bank statement once a month. That's one reservoir of energy. That's one container of the currency and like what you create. There's other accounts there. You have a spiritual account, you have an emotional account, and Capricorn really learns to use its time to make sure it's depositing energy in all of those accounts. Because again, like when we kind of spoke about, they don't take debit cards when you're crossing the river of Styx, right? There's other things that we kind of get asked for. And, we have this interesting dance with death, but Capricorn teaches you if you don't want to fear death, you respect death. Because when you respect death, you respect your time, and every minute, every second is funneled to this purpose of this divine exploration, and on it, we do have some divine paradoxes. Like, why do I have to go to hell to find heaven? Well, it's part of the whole thing, because remember, we perceive everything in duality, but it's all one big coin. Right. Everything is contained, and sometimes it's hard for us to kind of perceive this. Well, Capricorn even gives us the strength to like face these divine paradoxes and these, everything that's kind of heavy and been a struggle. And, we kind of spoke about it last time. Capricorn and Saturn, when you like cry to the world about your struggles, they're like, oh, do you think you're the first one? Like, you're the first one that's lost the love of your life, or you're the first one that got fired for a silly reason? You're not. And it's not saying that like that moment wasn't special or it wasn't painful, but it's just saying like, this is part of the experience. Mm-hmm. What are you going to learn from that?
Exactly.
Are you going to get back up? Are you going to like dust yourself off, rub some dirt into it? Or are you just going to fold? Because Mother Nature will eat you. If you're stagnant and you don't evolve, nature will destroy you, because nature has to kill stagnation because it goes against the natural law process. Saturn teaches us in Capricorn, there are immutable laws in nature that can't be changed. It's whether you align to them that you can grow from them. But as you move away from them, you're going to feel pain and suffering and heaviness and attachment to this form. But aligning to things like this will kind of be the ultimate liberation, which, again, climbing of the spine, climbing of the Kundalini.
The ultimate liberation. Awesome, man. Well, I know we covered a lot, and so I'm excited to see what this year does for the two of us and this podcast. And I think that everything that we've covered with today's episode is a great omen to like what we will do with this discipline, or not even an omen, but this path that we're going to have ahead for us, and how we're going to let it unfold has to do a lot with the conversations that you and I not only agree on and discuss about with regards to Capricorn, but the idea of what this ascension truly represents. And so I'm excited, man. I'm really excited for all the new things that we're doing. Last year was a lot of work, and not in a bad way. I think, again, work is a good thing. I think, you talked about career in our 10th house. And I think that, if it brings fulfillment, it never feels like any kind of work, but it does take some energy to really put these things forth, so that next year and the year after and so forth, unfold and open new doors that we didn't even expect that we would be knocking on. So I'm excited, man. I'm really excited. It's an unpredictable reward that comes if you're patient enough. And I think that's what I really appreciate from everything we've done together, but also what we talk about here and how we get closer to having an understanding of many of the discussions that are going to come from this podcast series, but also the ones that we've already talked about before. You kind of refine your ideas. And I think that's where I find a lot of fulfillment.
Yeah. Yeah. No, beautiful, man. And it does. It's a kind of a fun sign to start the year off.
Right.
It's like good energy. I have to say though, personally, I'm kind of terrified, because this is like the most space cadet-y I've ever felt on an episode. Like, I really feel like I'm like,
yeah,
everything, like we've stopped, and I'm like, I don't think I'm making any sense. And you're like, no. And the last thing I wanted to kind of say about Capricorn is Capricorn can also be like very critical. And so, especially like the unique planets I have in Capricorn, maybe I was highly critical, but I'm pretty sure when I listen back to this episode, I'm going to be like, Eddie was spitting fire. I sucked. Maybe I didn't do as well as I wanted to today. Well, what's that going to do? I need to organize and be more composed next time. Right. I need to, do these kind of steps of learning from these things of oh, I could have done better. But you were spitting fire today, buddy.
Oh, dude. I mean, I can only have a conversation with an individual like yourself if I feel that whatever I'm saying has an understanding that needs to have more of an input into what I'm what I've digested. And so that's where I feel like I'm not saying you're being overcritical in any way. I think that I understand what you're saying about being more organized. I feel like you've we've both grown as individuals. And I think that just having a conversation like this can be thrown into so many directions because we know where we're both coming from, but we also are very conscious that there's people listening that we want them to, they can't sit in a room and then just go, wait, hey guys, I got to raise my hand. Like, can we go back to that? And I think we're very conscious that we're trying to be inclusive to everybody who may not be on the same page you and I are, just friends. And I think that's a privilege you and I have, is that we can sit in any room and just be like, did you know? And you're like, I did. I'm like, and you're like, right? I'm like, solid. And the bartender in front of us is like, what just happened here? Like, I missed everything you guys just, can you guys go back? Why are you both so excited about this conversation? And I think that that's something that we're going to have to sort of, reestablish throughout these episodes, is like, how do we keep the third party in here, which is the audience, included into, or like our moments of like, hey, I had all these questions. You're like, fire away. I'm like, this, and that. And you're like, yep. And I'm like, cool. And it's like, all right, well, I'll see you later. I'm like, until next time. And you're like, until next time. And then people are like, wait, I have so much, what just happened? So anyways, I just think that's an idea that we're going to have to like work on with our own discipline on these episodes. But anyways, I'm just rambling at this point. So yeah.
Yeah, no, it definitely can give you that grounding, solidifying energy, man. And so, yeah, again, so great to see you, and bringing up the third part of this party as the audience truly is the most important part of this.
Exactly.
And so, yeah, making sure that the conversations are aligned is always kind of the goal. And so, yeah, man, I'm very excited with everything that's kind of coming in this future. And yeah.
Cool. Well, yeah. I mean, again, I want to keep going. I feel like it's such an interesting reset constantly. It's like you say something, I say something, and we keep going. But I definitely want to just say, like, so thankful for everybody out there who's, allowed us to come into our third year. And, we've got a lot of things that we've prepared in order to make sure that our ramblings become more condensed. And I think you'll notice it even more. I've noticed it with the way Daniel talks. At times he will take the beginning and an ending and make it just this perfect, conjunction of an understanding so quickly that I'm like, oh, thought we were going to cover that for the next 15 minutes. And instead it was like done in 5. So I want to see where this is going to take us with that, so I'm thankful for everyone who's like evolved with us, and, the encouragement you've had, the criticism you've had, all the things are just to basically walk each other home, and that's really the thing I gotta keep telling myself, is like, that's what we're here to do, is to just sort of remind ourselves that there's not only more to this life. It's not just all pain and suffering, but the pain and suffering will only bring us closer and will only make us realize like the beauty that we face in this very limited time here in the physical body. So thank you to all for listening, and until next time.
Until next time.
There you go, man.